Welcome to Her Path, the podcast for busy women looking for purpose, health, and happiness. Today, we are going to talk about imposter syndrome. Ladies, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome?
Yes, all the time.
All the time. You know what? There's some research that's been done that says 70% of Americans have experienced imposter syndrome at one point or another. So I found that fascinating because I thought I thought imposter syndrome was a woman issue, but it's really not. It's men and women. So imposter syndrome is really around us feeling like we're not worthy of whatever we're doing, or we don't belong in the situation that we've been placed in. And I can tell you that I've battled this my whole career. Most of you know I've started out as a respiratory therapist. And as I moved through my career, manager of an air ambulance service, manager of a big healthcare division, an IT director, executive over operational excellence, project management for a busy, health system. I always would say, why am I doing this? Why did they think I can do this? I'm just a respiratory therapist. Classic imposter syndrome. Then I became a CEO of my own business. Why do I think I can do this? I am just a respiratory therapist. So before we start really diving into how this comes about and what we can do about it, I would love for you to share some of your experiences with imposter syndrome.
I think for me, I'm a family physician every day, and it comes up for me at work a lot. And so that's just the most recent example that I can give you. And sometimes it happens when I have to take care of another physician that's my patient. And even before the encounter, I see that it's, a physician patient. And then some thoughts will start going through like, oh my gosh, like, I hope I take good care of them, or, I hope I can answer their questions. Or sometimes it's like, I'll just ahead of time already assume like, oh, they just need me to order something that they already want. They already know what they want. They're just going to tell me what to do for them. And I have to kind of catch myself in that sense. And so what I try to do to redirect my brain in that point and say, I'm going to assume nothing. I know what I'm doing. I know that I'll be able to take good care of them. But before I was able to learn how to get to that point, I would kind of freak out sometimes and, second guess my ability to be able to take care of someone who I assumed would be more knowledgeable, smarter, tell me what to do. And it led to like a lot of anxiety, a lot of feeling of insecurity, dissatisfaction, because not only did it happen if I was taking care of another physician, but it would happen, if I was taking care of someone and they all of a sudden started asking questions of like, well, I read on the internet, or I read an article, and, I was, had a meeting with another specialist who recommended something that you're not telling me about, or something opposite of what you're explaining. And so in situations like that, my brain would kind of go haywire and be like, oh my God, am I missing something? Is there something I don't know? Am I doing something wrong? And it took practice and having some insight on that situation to be able to have my own back and be able to stand up for myself against myself, if that makes any sense. Whenever, our a-hole brain starts saying, ooh, girl, you haven't been reading up on your,
Right.
Academy of Family Physicians guidelines. There's something you don't know. And, I had to separate myself from my brain and say, look, I got this. Let me look it up. Let me find out. Let me see if there is something we're missing, instead of all of a sudden assuming that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about, and I won't be able to take care of this person.
Right. That's just a great example. I think we can all put ourselves right in your shoes for that one. Beth, what about you? Have you ever experienced this?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to go with Gabby. Like my career as a hospice nurse is just so ingrained into my identity. And then there was a point in my career where I needed to take a break from being a hospice nurse. My dad had died, and it was just really too emotional for me to continue that work. And so I decided I needed a break. And I my resume definitely shows it. I just like ping ponged around different places and just felt, I worked in the hospital in a med surg unit, and I didn't feel like I belonged and that I was an imposter. And I worked in just a various different settings over the course of probably 3 years. And I never stayed longer than I think 9 months in one place, which I found kind of interesting of like the 9 months. I feel like that kind of like the birthing process, right? Like, okay, then moving on to the next place. And then it wasn't really until I came back into my, my wheelhouse of nursing and my identity of being a hospice nurse that I felt like I was coming home again. And I just found that very fascinating. And I'm still working with that imposter syndrome and that identity shift. It's like an identity crisis, like being a business owner and an entrepreneur, and still having that identity as a hospice nurse. And because I still am working as a hospice nurse, yet I'm pulling away from that and stepping into the identity of business owner, life coach, health coach, wellness coach, helping women live well with autoimmune. And it's interesting how our brain, like, it likes the familiar and it likes to keep going back, and having that just, I don't know, just identity crisis and imposter syndrome, and being in some of these rooms, like I'm rubbing shoulders with these like entrepreneurs that are millionaires, and talking with them and realizing, that they're people too, and feeling that I don't belong, but yet I'm trying, working on feeling like that is my identity and stepping into that. So it's been my experience.
Yeah, I think we all have so many experiences. So I wanted to share with you, let's dive a little bit deeper into this. So there was some research done by welldoing.com, and they discovered that there are 5 types of imposter syndrome. So this is going to be like a little quiz for you guys as well as our listeners to kind of see which one of these you fall into. So the first type is the perfectionist. You set high goals and get disappointed at the smallest mistake. The
That's not me.
superhero. Yeah, I'm gonna read them all. The superhero, you push yourself harder than anyone else. The expert, you consistently go on courses because you feel you don't know enough. The natural genius, you feel like a failure when you don't succeed on the first try. And then the soloist, you prefer to work alone because asking for help is a sign of weakness. All right. While you guys are thinking, I'll tell you which ones I fall into. I definitely relate to the superhero. I push myself harder and harder and harder, and I really don't give myself a lot of grace when I'm in the zone and trying to become the master of something. And sometimes I can be the natural genius. You feel like a failure when you don't succeed at the first try. I can, and you know what's interesting is in my corporate career, that was definitely the way it went. The first time I failed, boom, that's it. See, I'm just a respiratory therapist. I shouldn't be doing this executive role or these big positions. But interestingly, now that I own my own business, I've given myself the space to try things and fail without, beating myself up. But definitely was a natural genius back in my corporate days. So what about you guys? Gabby, you kind of, the very first one you said, oh yeah, that's me.
So I said the perfectionist, I said that's not me. I'm okay with not being perfect, or having everything just right. Superhero, no, not at all. The expert, of feeling especially you know, growing up, being the oldest, being the first to go to college in my family, there was a lot of, oh, you're so smart, or oh, you're so smart, oh, you're so smart. So along with that comes with, you should know a lot. You should know everything. I remember I was hanging out with some friends, high school, you know, high school is, you know, is a lot of fun, but you know, we're all teenagers, kids say stuff all the time, but something stood out because I had gotten into Stanford, right? And it's like, ooh, a school for smart people. And I did something dumb, like I spilled something. It was like something not related to intelligence, but like the group of friends were like, oh, you did something so stupid and you're going to Stanford and you know, made it, you know, you spilled the whole thing on the table, like a loud comment like that. And it just was kind of like, you know, uh, something simple, but just question my intelligence from doing something, you know, something simple. So it was always like, you're so smart, you're so smart, you should know better, you should know everything. And so I think where that one kind of comes from, and is just kind of continued from there. As a physician, people come and ask questions and even things that are non-medically related and expect you to know everything. At least that's what I think, expect you to know everything. And we try our best, but there's no way I'm going to know everything. And then the soloist, and I think for me also, because I was the oldest in my family and my family did depend on me to a certain extent. My mom didn't go to school. She didn't go to, you know, middle school, high school. And there was a lot of responsibility on me to do a lot of things. And I think over time, it just became ingrained in my mind somewhere that I should be able to do a lot of things and be strong and stoic and not break, not ask for help, not get the support, because that was a sign of vulnerability and weakness. And I didn't have any time to be weak or vulnerable. You just have to take care of business, take care of everyone. And so that was something that I have had to struggle with over time, is learning how to allow myself to be vulnerable and ask for help with things that I'm stuck on, because I have been stuck on things for years in the past for the lack of asking for help to try to figure things out. And so that is probably, those two are the biggest type of imposter syndrome that I could relate to.
How about you, Beth?
Remind me what the definition of the perfectionist was, because I feel like,
Perfectionist, you set very high goals and get disappointed at the smallest mistake.
yeah, ding, ding, ding. That is like for sure. It's so ding, ding, ding. It is so interesting because I never thought myself as a perfectionist. And the older I get and the more I get to really know myself, I'm amazed. But yes, absolutely. I have identified some perfectionist type, I guess, characteristics in other areas of my life over the last, I'd say, 5 years. And it was just kind of really shocking to me, actually, because in so many other ways in my life, I'm just very laid back, easygoing, go with the flow kind of person. But when it comes to myself and my own, you know, creation or what I put out in the world or my work, perfectionism is definitely high number one on that list. And I think the other one was superhero for me. Not recently in my entrepreneur world, because of some health challenges that I'm having. I am not allowed to be the superhero, but it's very innate and natural for me in the caregiving role and in my hospice nurse role to be the superhero and to put my own needs and self aside to be there to help others. And I think a lot of, you know, people in the medical profession can identify with, you know, or being a caregiver doesn't have to be in the medical profession, you know, moms and others. It's so easy to put your own needs aside and, you know, go all day long without eating and drinking and going to the bathroom when you're helping and serving other people and putting other people's needs first. That has definitely been true for me in my past. And I have learned to rein that in also as I'm getting older, that I need to put myself first, and the superhero comes naturally. So that don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. So I want to spend the rest of this time talking about what we can do about it. What are those strategies that we can take into our daily life to kind of remove the imposter syndrome or reduce it or quell it in our minds? So I have a couple of different ways to go at this. So first are just some anti-sabotage, right? So our minds are sabotaging us. So a couple new thoughts that you can introduce into your space. So first thing, you deserve to be where you are. There's a reason why you were selected, and it's so important that you believe it, right? Harder to do than it is to say it. You're not alone. Almost everyone has experienced imposter syndrome at one point or another. You know your worth, right? You are more than your title. You're more than your education. You're more than your past. Knowing your true potential helps you know your value. And, to Beth's first point, don't make perfection the goal, rather the progress and acceptance, right? You're making progress towards this new endeavor that you're in, and accept where you are. Don't go it alone, right? The power of community. And we're going to talk about community in a couple of weeks. And networks and confidants are so powerful to help you think differently. Like our little group here, we are each other's confidants and sounding boards, and we help each other when we get in these kinds of ruts. But to have a community of people that you feel safe to explore with is so important. What other tactics do you all have that you use when you feel imposter syndrome sneaking up?
I think, and I was just having a conversation with some girlfriends this weekend about about this. Of course, we didn't call it imposter syndrome, but we were, discussing scenarios where we feel low confidence or inability to be able to, kind of hang with the crowd at that moment. And I think having insight as to what is happening in the moment is key, because sometimes in the moment we don't realize what's happening until after we look back and think like, oh, I should have done this, or I should have said that. And so we were specifically talking about like socializing with groups of like networking or, professional groups, which tends to kind of bring up that imposter syndrome sometimes. I know it does for me when I'm, networking with a group of docs or administrators or professionals where that imposter syndrome can come up. Is anticipate and look back at situations that you've had in the past that have brought up that imposter syndrome and plan for that to happen again in that similar situation, if those situations tend to happen again, such as networking events. That's an example I can give you. And plan for thoughts that you can think in the moment when that imposter feeling comes up.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about a situation with one of my girlfriends where she's like, it seems like these other, business women seem to make passive aggressive comments. And in the moment, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to react. And it's not until like afterwards when I think about it, like, damn, I should have said this. Man, I could have had a good quip or a comeback or something. But it's after you had a moment to think about what was actually going on. So anticipate that it's going to happen and have a plan for yourself for when it does happen. How can I think? What can I think in the moment? And how do I want to show up and react in that moment? Because those moments tend to happen over and over, but we don't prepare ourselves for it. And so it's either you can prepare yourself by either journaling and documenting, like, what comments, what situations tend to bring up this feeling of, lack of self-confidence, imposter syndrome, inadequacy. What would I prefer to think in that moment? And how would I prefer to react? or, kind of role play it with a group of friends, like, look, this happened, this is what so-and-so said, and this is what I thought in the moment, and kind of talk through it and come up with some ways of thinking and acting, with some friends or with the group that, can really hold that space for you.
So good.
Yeah, so good. I like that. I mean, that is basically what I was thinking too, is coming up with some thoughts to practice ahead of time and then in that moment and then after the moment too. And I know it's happened to me with some of the business conferences that I've attended and feeling like I don't belong and reflecting afterwards and journaling and realizing some of the thoughts that I have come up with that I practice is like, I do belong because I'm here and I am worthy.
Right.
And like you said, Elise, like there's a reason I'm here. There's a reason I was selected. I have a big belief that God puts us in our place at the right place at the right time. And just leaning into that too, that, my creator thinks I'm good enough to be here, so I am worthy. Yeah.
Love that. I love that. I added in I have some of those thought work questions, like journaling questions that Gabby was getting at. What have I achieved that proves I belong here? What if this is all happening as it should? What are the positive impacts that I've helped to create? How can I be an example of what's possible? And how do I want to show up in this situation? I think that was one of yours. But I love the opportunity and I love the thought of getting out in front of it. I'm going to a big networking event. How am I going to feel when I'm there? How am I going to feel as I'm talking to all these big business owners and doing some of this thought work ahead of time? I think that's such an important skill that we need to develop, right? We need to build that muscle to get out in front of it.
Yeah, especially as professional women, we've all been in situations where we felt put on the spot, and it's usually, I'm gonna say it's usually a man. It can definitely be another woman. It could be someone who has no ill intention whatsoever. Sometimes it could be someone who wants to be a little passive aggressive and make themselves feel better by, making you feel not bad. There's so many different scenarios in where it can come up where sometimes we feel like on the spot and unprepared and ill-equipped and self-conscious about, showing up as ourselves. And I think the more comfortable we can be with just being ourselves, the less of that feeling of inadequacy or not prepared we will have. And that's something that I have had to struggle with, we could be in a meeting with, I could be in a meeting with professional, physicians and like, oh, so this study has come out with blah, 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 blah. And so, what do you think about it? Have you heard of it? I've had to be okay to be like, no, I haven't heard of it. And, I'll look it up later and see, but that sounds pretty interesting. Instead of making it mean something about me being ill-equipped and unprepared and unknowledgeable. Or let's say somebody asked me about, oh, I heard you wanted to make a coaching business. So, how's that going? Instead of making it mean like, oh, I don't have any clients, or I haven't really gotten, it up and running, or I'm still working on it, instead of making that mean something about me being an imposter, not a business person, not successful, looking at all of the things that I have accomplished, that I do have going for me, can definitely shift that feeling of inadequacy or of being an imposter entrepreneur.
Right. Anything else you want to add, Beth?
No, I can't think of anything.
All
Maybe.
good. All good. Well, we hope that this has been enlightening for you and that the tips and tricks and strategies that we've shared will help you as you tackle, any imposter syndrome, lack of self-confidence that you have. If you're enjoying listening to us, please subscribe and please like and give us a good rating. That would really help us and share it with your friends and colleagues and people that could benefit as well. So thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.
Hey, one more thing before we leave. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are certified professional coaches, but this broadcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next week.